Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with How to Become a Classical Music Snob. I obsess about this topic, I have to confess, because I've been shocked at just how many of you actually love the music and aren't listening to it so that you can talk about it and impress other people and somehow validate your lonely and pathetic lives. I have to solve this problem, or else what good is this whole exercise? I really don't know. So I propose to offer a series of rules on how to be a classical music snob. And if you pay attention to them, I guarantee that it will work for you. It will work beautifully. You may still have lonely and pathetic lives, but you will delude yourself into thinking that the loneliness and patheticosity is somehow meaningful. And, that's why we're here, of course. So, rule number 1. You ready? Never refer to a piece by its popular name or title. Ever. Now, this can be quite tricky because different composers have different naming conventions. Let's go through some examples and see what I'm talking about, shall we? Mozart. Mozart's always a good place to start because Mozart wrote tons and tons and tons of music. There's 620 something Kerschel numbers. One of you will tell me, feel free. Don't worry about what it says about you, that you may know the answer. Anyway, people often do this. Even here, I've seen a little bit of it, where people say, "Oh, I just love Kerschel 488." Well, that's a conversation stopper. Who the hell knows what Kerschel 488 is? It happens to be Piano Concerto number 23. Well, when you've got a bunch of piano concertos numbered 1 through 27, some of which have titles, and some of those titles are stupid. I understand calling Piano Concerto 21 number 21 instead of Elvira Madigan, because it's named after a movie that nobody's seen. So, that's okay. But, you might as well just call it 23. That's what everybody else does. Sometimes you can refer by key. Oh, I love the C minor. Well, that's Piano Concerto number 24. Because there's only one piano concerto in C minor, that might be more specific. So there you're sort of floating on the boundaries. That's okay. You're walking on the edge. But it depends who you're talking to. If you know that they will know what you're talking about, that's one thing. If you say it because you know they don't know what you're talking about, then you're on the road to becoming a true classical music snob. So the Kerschel number people, generally the catalog people in general, have snob issues and are aspirational classical music snobs. Think about Bach. Bach with his BWVs. Oh, what a pain in the ass that is. But it's tricky because the first couple hundred BWVs are just the cantatas in sequential order. So you're not going to impress anybody by saying, "Oh, I love BWV 12," because everybody's going to know it's a cantata. On the other hand, when you get above 1,000, see, that's where the snob factor comes in. BWV 1066. There you go. Well, I like 1066 because that was the year of the Norman invasion, right? The Battle of Hastings, wasn't that 1066? Anyway, BWV 1066 is the first orchestral suite. And if you go back only one, to 1065, you've got the concerto for 4 harpsichords. And the one, of course, everybody talks about is 1052, because that's the D minor concerto for harpsichord, also known as keyboard concerto number 1. They're numbered, by the way, 1 through 7. Nobody knows what those numbers are. So it's a little difficult when there are no names for things otherwise. So BWV 1052, well, a lot of people will probably know that, if only because they've been forced to identify it that way. But if you called the B minor Mass, "Oh, I'm listening to BWV," I don't even know what its BWV number is, people would think you're crazy or a serious snob, because who's going to sit around memorizing thousands of catalog numbers? I mean, people do, but they're looking for validation of their lonely and pathetic lives. Somehow they may think they've been validated, but the rest of us, I think we have our doubts. Schubert is a fascinating example because Schubert has Deutsch numbers, right? And there's like a bazillion of them because he wrote 600 songs. The problem with Schubert, and the interesting thing about Schubert, is that you can't really do the Deutsch thing with Schubert. The only Deutsch number you need to know to deal with Schubert is 960, because that's the last piano sonata. And it's so famous and so legendary, and it doesn't have a title, and it needs a title. You know, maybe it should be called The Last, because all the other Schubert pieces we need to know, they have titles. Reasonably so, because songs have titles. I mean, you're not going to call Gretchen am Spinnrad Deutsch 570 or whatever the heck it is. People will have no idea what you're talking about. Nobody knows what these are. So you've got to actually use the title. And so because Schubert has so many things with titles, he's got titles for the things he didn't give titles to, like the Death and the Maiden Quartet, because it uses something from the song of that title, the Wanderer Fantasy. You've got the Unfinished Symphony for obvious reasons, the Great C Major. Well, it helps because there are two C major symphonies, a little one and a big one. So you give the big one a name and you're in business. If you were to just say Deutsch something referring to the Great C Major Symphony, people would have some real issues. You're just going to befuddle everyone. You're not going to prove what a snob you are. You're not going to convince people that they should know what you know, and because they don't, they're inferior, which is the whole point, right? You're just going to persuade them that you're an idiot. and so you got to be careful when you do Schubert. Another composer who's impossible to do classical snob thing with is Brahms. It's very interesting. Brahms, of course, has opus numbers. He never needed like a Brahms catalog thing, although there probably is one out there. I don't even know. But the truth of the matter is Brahms was so organized that there can't possibly be any errors. Nobody uses opus numbers when they talk about Brahms. It's the first serenade. There's not enough of any one thing that you need to do that for clarity, and learning what they all are would just make people think you're like, using some sort of controlled substance. I mean, let me give you an example. I have here, here it is. Here's the Dochnani Brahms cycle. Brahms is so wedded to just whatever it is, Symphony number 1, Piano Trio number 3, that they don't even tell you what the opus numbers are in the back of the box. They don't. I mean, Brahms Symphony number 1 is opus 68. Did you ever hear in your life somebody try to impress you by saying, "Oh, I was just listening to Brahms opus 68"? I mean, hell, we hardly even call it the C minor symphony, which used to be sort of acceptable. It's just Symphony number 1. That's it. The German Requiem. You're just not going to do it any other way. It's like a total waste of time. Another composer who is absolutely snob-proof is Haydn. The reason is because Haydn wasn't even cataloged for a lot of his life, so you couldn't do the catalog. And when Anthony Hoboken did the original Haydn catalog, oh, he was so smart. He really was, because it begins with all the symphonies in sequential order, numbered 1 through 104. So you're going to say 104, 102. I mean, you're just going to, that's it. And you're not going to say Hoboken Roman numeral 1, number 94. It just doesn't work. Each portion of Haydn's work has its own naming convention. And so you're not going to impress anybody unless you go Hoboken 63, 402, which is like a baritone trio or something. Who knows? Nobody would even care. Nobody would have any clue what you're talking about. Each little segment of his work has a separate little naming convention. The masses all have titles. The Nelson Mass. So you don't have to say mass number, I don't know what number it is. And the things that do have nicknames, even if they're stupid nicknames, you have to use them because those are the pieces he's known for. And so if you don't use them, people will just think you don't know what the name is. If you say, oh, I just heard this Symphony number 94 by a guy named Haydn, and you didn't say, I just heard the Surprise Symphony, and the person you're talking to knows it's the Surprise Symphony, oh, then your whole program of advanced snobbery just goes straight down the toilet. Now, Beethoven is really tricky. Beethoven is tricky because we don't care about the snob factor in Beethoven until we get to the late works, because the late works are supposed to be sublime. And sublime snobbery is like one of the highest forms that you can ever get. So you get the last three piano sonatas, basically, which are, I don't know, opus 1, 29, 30, 31, something like that. And then that's wrong, but no, it's 101, 109, 110, 109, 110, 111. I don't pay any attention. I call them the last three piano sonatas. And I just basically think of them as the first, the second, the last one. But the string quartets, you could say the string quartet in C sharp minor. That's legit. It's not terribly snobbish. It just means you really know which ones they are. You could say Opus 131, which is the string quartet in C sharp minor, which is actually a little bit more on the side of snobbery. But those works have no titles, so you can't shortcut. And so it's either the work and the key, or it's the opus number. So they've become conventional. And people think that they're being very snobbish by identifying them by opus numbers, but they're really not. They're being snobbish if they identify early stuff with opus numbers. But then there's lots of Beethoven to listen to that doesn't have an opus number. WOOs, Werke ohne Opuszahl. And I've never run into a music snob. This is an unexplored area of snobism. Snobs, future snobs, budding snobs, take note. Find a way to refer to Werke ohne Opuszahl works that weren't originally cataloged by Beethoven. And oh my goodness, your reputation as a music snob is going to be secure. I guarantee it. You could also do the same thing with Kürschel, Anhang, something, whatever, Mozart pieces, things that are additions to the catalog that have these big, long, opus posthumous, things like that. You could have a wonderful time doing that. But those are just some of the ways in which music snobs can exploit their snobbery. They can really impress the rest of us. Well, not impress them, maybe depress the rest of us, let's face it, and annoy a lot of other people, but take smug satisfaction that they have validated themselves by learning piles of trivial and unessential information, which is utterly irrelevant to the actual experience of listening, which nobody's really going to expect you to do. You'll just wing it when it comes to that part. But you need to be able to talk about it correctly. So, I hope that this explanation has helped you on your aspirational journey to becoming a genuine classical music snob. Never use the popular designation. Find some other way. And remember, if nobody understands what you're talking about, that's the whole point, isn't it? Because your greatest fear is that somebody's going to know more than you. So you have to guard yourself against that possibility. And this is how to do it. So I hope you found this helpful. We'll be back with rule number 2 in how to become a classical music snob. At some point, we'll do it. We'll get you there. We will get you there. Keep on listening. No, stop, don't. Don't. Just keep on memorizing catalog numbers and other pieces of trivia. That's what you should be doing. Take care.